Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be the very first tutorial I do on this channel, and it will be about watercolor. I asked you guys over on TikTok, Instagram, and in my YouTube shorts if you had any questions regarding watercolor, and I gathered some of your answers as well as some of the things I wanted to share anyway. The video is going to be split in two parts. First part is going to be about the tools in general, the paper, the paints and the brushes, and the second part is going to be about basic techniques, about texture, color mixing and all of that. So if this is something that interests you, let's just start. Okay, so let's start with the most important. Also, sorry, each time I want to record something there must be planes going everywhere, so please stay with me. So if there is one thing you should remember from this video, like altogether, it's the paper. Because no matter how good your paints are, if you have amazing brushes or anything, if your paper is trash, it's gonna be trash. Yeah. I don't know if you remember at school when you had to do watercolor or gouache on those very thin, almost printer paper, and it was so bad because when you were putting water on it, it would shrink and go all weird. Yeah, so the paper really is the most important. So there are three things you should look out when it comes to paper. First and most important thing I would say is the weight of the paper. I would always advise, like this one, 250 grams to the thickest I have, the 300 grams, and basically it's the thickness. If I can show you here how thick this is. So it's not cardboard, because there are also cardboard watercolor paper. I've never used them, so I can't really give my opinion on them, but thick paper is the most important. Now you can find many kind of different heavier paper. It doesn't need to be something very expensive, especially when you start and you don't really know if you're going to like the medium or not. Don't just go crazy and buy the most expensive one. Here I have some mixed medium from Carandash. I love this paper. This is one of my favorite that isn't very expensive, I guess we could say, because there are two types of paper. Once you've taken care of the weight of the paper, you have to look for the type of paper itself. So you have cellulose, which is basic paper. It's made out of wood pushed together. You know what I mean, it's just paper, and it's less expensive. And then on the more expensive side, you have the 100% cotton paper, which is what I use now. I started using cellulose paper like everyone else, and as much as it's good to start, you'll be stuck in your progression in one way or another. It depends on what kind of painting you want to do, but if you want to do very layered paintings, such as the galaxies I do, sometimes there are up to 5 layers. With cellulose paper, it's not the best, to be honest. But there is also 50% cellulose and 50% cotton paper. I think Carson has this kind of paper, but since I've never used it, I can't really give my opinion. I've heard that it was the best thing to try because it's not that expensive, but it's a better quality than just cellulose. Do what you feel like is the best, because Arches is kind of expensive, but it's really worth it once you know what you're doing. Like I'm not going back. So now one of the main difference between cotton paper and cellulose paper is that when you work with very wet techniques like wet and wait technique, makes sense, the paper will stay wet longer with cotton paper, whereas it'll dry faster and not as evenly with cellulose paper. And the difference it does is, if we take those two galaxies that I made, this one is with the same paper as this collection, except it's the mixed media paper, and this one was made with 100% cotton. You can see here with the cellulose paper that there are some weird textures, like here and there. There's a little bit here too, but we can't see it as well. But this part and this part are very visible, and these are called blooming textures. And this happens when one part of the paper dried before another part. So while I was working on this part of the paper was already dry, and that means that the wet part is going to push the paint towards the dry part, and it does this kind of line basically. And you can see that this is not at all the case on this one, right? So this is one of the main difference. And also, if you want to work in layers, unfortunately I don't think I have an example here. Like I said at the beginning, with cellulose paper, sometimes the paint tends to stay on top of the paper instead of penetrating the paper. I can do a small demonstration. I think this is going to be more telling than just words. So we are going to take the Van Gogh paper and the Arches paper, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go with a very flat color thing. Okay, I'm gonna go with something like this. That's not really important, to be honest. It's just to get an idea of what is gonna happen there. So I'm gonna mix a bit of this purple, and we are going to do the same here. See already how the color mix more evenly here than here. That's crazy. And if you look very close up, you can see that the paint is gonna go in the paper, whereas here, I don't know if it makes sense, but it stays on top of the paper. So we are going to let these two dry, right? I'm going to put them under the sun there to dry, and I'll come back and show you what I mean. So while the paint I've just put on the paper is gonna dry, there is one last thing to consider when buying paper, is whether it is hot pressed or cold pressed. There are other types of paper which are rough and very rough. I don't have any examples here, so I can't really show you. But here I have an example of hot pressed paper. Unfortunately, I ran out of hot pressed paper, so I can't really show you one without any kind of paint. But if you look very closely, you can see that the finish is very, like it's like satin. It's flat, if that makes sense. Whereas the cold pressed paper has more of a texture, as you can see. I can show you on the up here. See how texture it is? Now they both work the same. It's just an artist's preference. All that I can say is that hot pressed paper tend to dry a very slight bit faster, but it's not very noticeable, to be honest. And you have to work more on textures when it comes to hot pressed paper, because it's so flat that nothing happens. You put your paint in there and it doesn't do anything. Whereas with cold pressed paper, because it has all those little ridges, I guess we could say, like this texture, when you put the paint on it, it does its thing. Like it moves around and it does its magic. For me, watercolor is magic, and the more magic you'll find is on cold pressed paper. Now it also depends of what you want to do. I have this mountain painting that I did a while back, and for this kind of painting I wouldn't have wanted to use cold pressed, because I like the very clean and soft finish it has. So yeah, it's really what you prefer. And then rough and very rough are the same as cold pressed, except that they're more and more textured. Now, if we come back to our paints that I've laid under the sun to dry, you can see that this one is almost completely dry, whereas this one is still a bit wet. I don't know if you can see that. It's still a bit wet, and this one is completely dry. So we've got to wait a bit longer for it to dry, but you can already see some weird texture over here because as the paint is staying on top of the paper instead of penetrating inside, it does weird things, like the paint doesn't know where to go, whereas here it's very even, right? So I'm just gonna leave it on the sun a bit longer because we need that to be completely dry. So we're dry on both sides, and what I want you to see is what happens if, for example, I wanted to wet the paper again to go with another layer. So I'm gonna take my clean water and my brush, so it's just clean water, right? And if I want to go on it to wet the paper, you can see that it's disturbing the paint everywhere. Okay, but if I do the same with the other paper, see, there's almost nothing moving. Maybe a little bit here on the edge, but yeah, here you can definitely see the paint being disturbed, whereas here it's not moving as much. You can see the paper is starting to work a little bit here, whereas on the other one it stays flat and pretty. So these are the basics about watercolor paper. I think that was long enough about paper, but since it's the most important, I really wanted to make things 100% clear that you can pretty much start with cellulose paper, but once you start to feel really at ease with watercolor and you want to progress, I think you won't really have the choice but to progress to 50% cellulose, 50% cotton, to really 100% cotton. And this paper, the cotton one, is also better for archiving your paintings. This not as much. Now let's talk about paints. I don't really have much to say about paints since it's not really the most important. You can use Crayola watercolor and still do something that is quite nice. Like the differences between more expensive watercolor versus very cheap ones is what it's made out of. Not about the pigments, but about the how do you say that? What keeps the paint together. In more expensive watercolor it's gum arabic, I think it's called in English, right? So it doesn't look chalky is what I'm trying to say. Like cheaper watercolor can look a bit chalky. I don't have any cheap watercolor because I started with that brand, so I can't really show you. You can find plenty of videos showing the difference with very cheap watercolor. Now you don't need, I'm talking about more expensive, but you don't need to go crazy wild. This brand Schmincke is a German brand, and it's on the more expensive side, but it's not crazy expensive. It's not like Sennelier or this kind of brands that are real expensive, but they're like butter to work with. Winsor & Newton are good as well, from what I've heard. What I would advise personally is to do what I did when I started. I started using just the 3 primary colors, and it's funny because 2 of them are still here. I started with the red, which is this one. It's a bit more of a pinkish red, but that's a red I like, so I started with that. A yellow, I chose a cool toned yellow, and this blue, which is a cobalt blue. And what is nice when you start with just the primary colors is that you can go with more expensive paint, of course, but you can also learn color theory. And I know it sucks, and I know people don't want to learn about this because, heck, color theory, I know, I've been there. We've all been there, but you'll have to learn one day or another. And I feel like starting with learning color theory is really giving yourself all the chances for later, because as much as it's cool to have all of these colors, you should be able to make every one of these with just the primary colors. I started like that. I was a bit frustrated because some colors were hard to make, but now if I use gouache or any other mediums that I don't have a lot of colors for, I can just mix them and do whatever I want. So that's what I would always suggest. start with the primary colors, a good paper, and just have fun with it. When buying your watercolor, there's also one more thing you should always check, because that's something that was making me lose my mind when I started. Unfortunately, I don't have paints of the same brand to show you what I'm talking about, so once you want to buy some paint, you'll have to check for yourself with what they say on the website or the shop. It's the little squares here, and that is about the opacity. The Schmincke here is here, okay, and the opacity is basically about how opaque, opaque, right? It'll go on paper, and I can show that to you with my Schmincke here because I know them by heart. And the color that was causing me issues was this very pretty purple, and that is a very not opaque paint, like not at all. So see, it's activated, I go in there like a lot, it's not full of water, but it's still not opaque at all, okay? And if I take, for example, this blue here, see, I have more water, but it's still a lot more opaque. And why that's important, it's that when you want to mix colors together, if you have one paint that is more opaque than another, it will make again this kind of blooming textures, or it'll look messy. It won't like mix together in a pretty way. I don't think I can show that here because, wait up a sec. Yeah, maybe you can see a little bit here that it's tricky. It's almost the same as here. So you go back, you add more and more. Well, it doesn't look that bad here. When I want to show you, it doesn't look that bad, but it really does mix kind of weird. It's not horrible, but it depends on what kind of end result you want. I think I have one painting where this happened. No, I don't have any of those paintings here, but let's say that it can just mix a bit weird. You have to trust me on that one. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not that important, but I know for me it was pretty annoying when I started because I wanted to have very flat, very non-textured mix, and you can see that it's starting to do the blooming here we talked about earlier, because this part is dry but this one is not. See, same here, it's dry here but it's not dry there. See what I mean? Ugh. And the last thing that you guys asked about is it better, not is it better, but what's the difference between using pans or tubes? And for me, honestly, I don't see any differences. It's basically the same. Like for example, the phthalo green I have here comes from this tube, and the indigo is this one. Like I've put them there months ago and now they're dried and they're doing their work as pan paints. The only real difference is that it would be less expensive to buy them in tube and to refill your pans than just buying pans every time. But I don't really see any other differences in opacity, in how they layer, things like that. For me, it's the same. And now for the last part, the brushes. Again, it's more about preferences, like every artist has. The only real advice I could give you is that you should always choose brush that can take a lot of water in, such as these ones. These ones are amazing because they can really take up a lot of paint and water in them, and you can just go along and do your thing without getting dry. Yeah, I would just suggest that you take a brush that have very soft bristles, because here, for example, this one is a bit harder. It doesn't look like so, but it's a bit harder. It's more, this one is more for gouache than watercolor. I can use it with watercolor as well, but sometimes when layering, even if I'm using my cotton paper, if I go too hard, I can disturb the paint that's underneath. So I always almost go with round brushes that are thick, that can take lots of water in, and that just do their job with watercolor. But then again, try many things, what you like the best. And for line work, I would go with something like this that is a bit longer, because again, it can take a bit more water in painting them. And when you want to do straight lines, you don't have to go into your palette like 10 times and having your line look like a wobbly snake. Yeah. So I think that's all in all what I wanted to talk about when it comes to tools. And that was a very long start of the video. Oh my god, it's been a long time. Now let's go to the practical side of things. So I'm gonna take my cotton paper back and let's talk about the basics. So what you would need when you want to start painting are 2 jugs of water. I'm using this because I'm fancy, but you need to have one with dirty waters, so to clean your brush, and the other one with clean water when you go back to take your paint into the pan. You will need a little spray. That is the artist's choice. Some just use their brushes, but I like to just go with my spray and spray my paints before starting so that they can activate at their own speed. And then a cloth. I use microfiber, but you don't have to, it's up to you. That's not really important. So the first thing I'm going to show you are different basic painting techniques, which are the wet on wet technique, which is what we use most often, and wet on dry, which is wet paint on dry paper. Then there are in-betweens, wet on damp and all of that, but it's not that important for today. We're just gonna go with the basics. So I'm gonna start with the wet on wet because it's what I use the most. So I'm just gonna do a small square here so that I can show you why this technique is nice. Now there aren't specific ways to do things. Again, it's at your preference. Wet on wet technique is maybe not important if you want to paint the inside of a character or things like that, but if you want to go with a very blended look where watercolor does its magic, this technique is the best. So you just do your thing there. See the water. Just don't be scared to put too much water because there is never enough water. Trust me. It shouldn't be puddly, but you can really go on there and add a good amount of water. Now that that's done, I want to go for a very small sunset. So I'm gonna start maybe with a bit of yellow, and I don't know if you can really see. I'm gonna zoom in and come here, but see, I'm putting the paint just down here, but it's starting to go up a little bit, and that's also because it's cold pressed paper, so all the little texture is pushing the paint upwards. Then I'm gonna go with a bit of this orange. See how it's doing its thing? And it's gonna mix beautifully like this. Ugh, look at that. Whoa, the orange doesn't look as pigmented on camera than it does on my paper. What the heck? Oh no. Wait, I'm gonna put a bit more because that looks sad. Okay. Then I'll go with a bit of pink. So as you can see, this technique is more about blending things together, having nice ombres, right? Here I used the purple I said that wasn't very opaque, but since this pink, it's opera pink if you're interested, it's not opaque either, it's fine, it's not a problem. And then you just blend them together and see how nice this ombre is. I'm gonna zoom out a bit because that's very zoomed in. Yeah, but all in all, this is a very nice technique for blending colors together and to add texture as well, but that is something I'm gonna show you after. Now I'm gonna go down there and I'm going to do the same but with wet and dry. So I'm gonna do the same thing, but I won't wet the paper beforehand. So you can see that the color comes in a lot more opaque and vibrant, right? You have to work a bit more to blend them together. Like it's not just the paint doing its thing, like you have to subconsciously do the mix together, like mix them together is what I'm trying to say. See that opera pink? It's so pretty. I love that color. There we go. Now keep in mind that when you are using this technique, once you approach like the ending up there, maybe this part of the paper is starting to dry out, so I wouldn't advise you going back and blending them together. You really have to do that while going up, if it makes sense. So you can see the difference. One is a lot more vibrant. This is a great technique when doing coloring in general. This is nicer for blended look. This is more vibrant. You can have very flat colors. You have a lot more control over what you're doing, whereas here it's just doing its thing. For example, for me, when I do galaxies, I use wet on wet technique for the first and second layer so that I have something that is very blended, and then for the rest, if I do more layers, I start to work on the texturing and the details. I go with wet on dry, sorry. So that's the most important thing. You'll have to try for yourself to see what you prefer. So that is first thing, okay? Another thing that's pretty important when working with watercolor, even though you can buy white, don't use it. Especially not if you want to do something lighter, because that's not the watercolor way. What I mean by that is if you want to have a color that is darker, for example, if I take this indigo here, which is one of my favorite color, if I want it to be darker, I'm gonna use less water. And if I want to make it lighter and maybe less opaque, I'm just gonna go there and add a bit of water. And that's how you judge, I guess, how you have control over the color, is by adding more or less water. And you add more and more and more, and that's how you get very opaque to a very light wash. Okay, it's as simple as that. I'm going to show you what happens if you're using white instead of doing it this way. So I'm gonna take my indigo again here. Oh, this color is so pretty. I can't even. I'm gonna make sure that my brush is very clean. I'm gonna go inside of the white. And that's how it looks. So it is lighter, but it's also more opaque, and it loses it's not saturated anymore. I'm adding some more white. So it's not ugly, but it's not pretty. Like if you want to mix this with maybe something that is there, it won't look good, because this is a lot more opaque. It almost looks like gouache. So take the habit of using more or less water to get more or less dark colors. Now let's imagine that you went ahead and you did your thing. So I'm using cobalt blue here. And you're realizing, oh my god, I went way too dark. Don't need to stress, pal. What you'll do is you'll have to react while it's still wet. It's better. You're going to clean your brush. And when it's still wet, you can just tap it on the cloth. You're going to go where you want to lift the paint up. You can do it again, clean brush, and you lift it. Right? Don't have a too wet brush, because it will pull the paint downward. It just has to be barely wet, and you lift some more. You can either do this, or another way you can do it, but it will give more texture, is using paper towel. So you go on where you want to lift the paint, and you can just lift it like this. Just keep in mind that it'll be more textured, and you might risk to have a bit of a blooming effect around where you use the paper. It's, for example, what I use to make this kind of texture here, right? I just go with a gray base, and then I use the paper towel to get those edges, right? So it'll be a lot more soft if you just lift with the brush, or it'll be textured if you are using paper towel. Now for the very last part of what I wanted to show you today, it'll be about textures and having fun with texture. And if you know me, if you've known me for a while, you know how much I hate texture. I'm on my journey to liking texture, okay? So I'm trying my best. I know how to make them. I'm just a bit careful when it comes to texture. I just like my things clean and soft. But let me show you what you can do. Let's go with some phthalo blue. Now, this is one of the prettiest colors on earth, let me tell you. First thing you can do to create some texture. So see here, I'm not using a lot of water, that's why it's very, very opaque. When the paint is still wet, but not too much, you're gonna take some salt. Yeah, this is becoming a cooking video. And you're just going to sprinkle a little bit. Can you even see that? Now don't be crazy, because the salt is going to take a bit of time to react with the paint. So at first you're gonna add a little bit and you'll be like, oh my god, who's that girl? Lunik said that it would give texture, but it's not giving anything. Like, is the texture in the room with us? No. It's just taking a bit of time. It's while it's going to dry, it's gonna give kind of snowflakey. It'll look like little snowflakes. You'll see. But what I like to use this for is making a line, almost like nebula. The salt is the technique I used here. As you can see, those little textures here. I did that with salt, so you can see it starting to do its thing, right? I might show you there, maybe it's more visible. See how it looks kind of icy, right? It's so cute. It's a very nice texture. While this is drying, I'm going to show you another one you can do. And this one, I'm gonna do 2 squares because there are 2 ways of doing it. The paper here, because I don't want this one to have the texture. So once your painting is starting to dry, but it's still on the wet side, you are going to take some clean water on your brush. Just be careful that it's not too wet again. You are going to go on top of your painting and you are going to just do this. You're going to hit your brush. You can do it with another brush or with your finger as well. And it's going to put a bit of water and give a very subtle, like little star texture. Can you see that? It's very subtle, it's very pretty. I'm going to show you the other way of doing it when this one is dry. And we are going to move on to the next texture. So you're gonna take some paper towel. Softer towels, paper towels are better, but it's not, do with what you have. So once it's starting to dry, you're just going to do your little bowl thing. Just don't do it like too scrunched, because otherwise it won't be very pretty. It'll take out way too much paint. But that's how you do clouds. You just go in there, you turn it around, and you add a bit of texture. You can go afterwards with a very scrunched one, and not pointy, but more pointy, and maybe add very small clouds. And that's how you achieve clouds. Ain't it magic? You can go back if you want it to be more white. If you want to lift even more, you can wet it just a little bit. And you go back and lift a bit more of that paint. And this is a very cute cloud. And the next one is a very special technique I've learned with another painter on YouTube. I have a blank, I don't remember his name. Paul Clark, yes. He used that technique to do kind of a rocky texture while it's still wet. You are going to take some plastic, like those plastic food thing, I don't know what is that called, I have no idea. But you take a bit of that, you come on top of your little square, you push it in, then you just go, I want to use the back of a brush and just create the texture, right? You just have fun in there, scrunching your little plastic sheet, I guess, yeah, you know what I mean. And then you'll just have to let it dry. Okay, so we're gonna let this dry. This square is now dried, so I'm gonna show you how you can make this effect, but a bit more drastic. Like it'll lift a lot of paint and it'll really look like droplets. If you want to make handmade cards or things like that, it's a very, very nice effect. So you're gonna take some water. I would be more mindful of where I'm putting the water on here and avoid too thin of droplets. I'm making the whole thing shake. I'm gonna add a bit more. Like this. What you can do to help the water to take the paint off is just move it around a little bit. So this has to be completely dry, okay? Otherwise you're gonna make a mess. Just let it work a little bit. And then what we'll do is we are going to take a paper towel again and go on top of it. Okay, so very nice. See how pretty that is? You can almost do maybe an underwater theme and have this being the bubbles. It's very pretty, right? So now I'm just going to let this one dry because it's gonna take its time, and then I'll be right back and we are going to wrap up this whole video. Okay, so I did leave everything to dry. I already took the salt off this first one, and you can see what I mean by snowflake texture. It's very pretty. And now we are going to take the plastic off this one. There we go. It's still a bit wet because I think I would have had to wait way too long, but you can see how pretty this is. So I'm just showing them to you once more here now that I'm on the bigger screen. I think you can see that better. The cute textures. This almost looks like scales. It's very pretty. So I think this wraps up the whole thing. That's basically what I wanted to explain and show you, like what's important, like the paper. I've just witnessed something on the paper. I wanted to show you about the opacity of the paint. Now that it's completely dry, you can clearly see that the less opaque purple did some mess when it mixed to the cyan that is more opaque, and it did some blooming, and it's very not flat, its texture, and it's not very pretty. So that is what I wanted to show you all along. But yeah, that's everything about the paper. Please use good quality paper, it's more important than the painting itself. And then have fun trying wet on wet, wet on dry, try to layer things. Always remember that watercolor can be washed out a lot, so you can have fun with layers. For example, to draw, to paint flowers. Maybe that's something you would like me to do. I think I can do a short showing you how I do flowers, because flowers are cute and they're very easy to do. If there's anything else you would like me to show you or to explain, I would love to make a second video about all this. Also, this is my first time doing such a long and thorough video, like with showing examples and things. I'm a bit everywhere. I try to be, you know what I'm doing and be very square when it comes to the organization. I tried my best. If it's a bit messy, I'm sorry, but I just hope that in the end the point I wanted to make are made and that it's helping you. If you are using any of those techniques on your paintings and you would like me to see them, you can tag me or on Instagram, on TikTok, or just send them to me via DMs. I would love to see. And yeah, I'll see you next time, probably for another art challenge, probably. Or the scroll box might be coming soon. I've been waiting for that box forever, it seems. But yeah, I think that's the next thing I'm gonna do. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.